Did Jesus deny being God? That is the claim that Muslims, that Jehovah's Witnesses, and that Unitarians frequently make to justify their beliefs when they deny the deity of Christ, when they deny that Jesus was God in the flesh. And they base this belief and they cling to it based on really one key verse that they love to rely on to make that claim, the claim that Jesus denied being God. And that verse can be found in Mark 10. And you will find later on in this video that the antidote to that misinterpretation of Mark 10 will be found in John 10, very conveniently. So let's go to Mark 10 in our Bibles. Let's start at verse 17. And when Jesus was gone forth into the way, there came one running, and kneeled to him, and asked Jesus, Good master, what shall I do that I may inherit eternal life? And Jesus said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. Okay, so that's the verse that they base their entire belief system. That's the verse that they hammer home when they try to argue that Jesus denied being God. Because in their mind, when Jesus responded in that manner, he was denying that he's good. And if he's denying that he's good and there's only one good, and that's God, well, then Jesus cannot be God. That's the argument. The problem is that that's a completely erroneous interpretation of what's going on here. And what's going on here is that this man approaches Jesus and asks him and addresses him as the good master. He says, Good master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, Why do you call me good? Why does Jesus ask him that? Well, because Jesus wants this man to truly think about what he's saying. And then Jesus says, there's no one good but one, that is God. So Jesus wants this man to reflect and think about the choice of words he's using. He wants him to ponder in himself, am I calling Jesus good because he's God? Because I understand who he is, who he really is, meaning the Word made flesh, i.e. God? Or am I just calling Jesus good to get in his good side? Well, the second part of that statement is correct. This man was telling Jesus, or calling Jesus, the good master because he wants to get in his good side. He wants to sort of butter him up. And Jesus is not having it. So Jesus says, Why do you call me good? He wants this man to reflect on why he would address Jesus as good, whether he really understands the meaning behind those words and who Jesus is, or if he's just trying to get on Jesus' good side, which is exactly what he's trying to do. But let's go back to this verse. Now you might go, well, that's kind of a stretch of an interpretation. But that's really the only interpretation you can come to when you read John 10. Or at least it's the most reasonable interpretation. Because let's go with just Jesus' words. If this is the criteria to identify God, let's go with it. Let's go with it. Jesus says, there is none good but one, that is God. Okay, that's our criteria, right? That's the criteria for the Jehovah's Witnesses. That's the criteria for the Unitarians. That's the criteria for the Muslims who deny the deity of Christ. And in fact, it's our criteria too. It's true. There's none good but one, and that is God. The question is Jesus God? That's the question. And we're going to get the answer in John 10. Let's go to John 10, verse 11. Yes, John 10, verse 11. Jesus says the following, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. Well, what did Jesus just do here? Jesus just called himself good. He just called himself good. So if there's no one good but one, and that is God, and Jesus just declared himself to be good, well, Jesus just declared himself to be God. If that's the only criteria that the Unitarians and the Muslims and the Jehovah's Witnesses want to go by, well, then Jesus himself just admitted that he's good. He just proclaimed that he's God, right? Let's go back to the context of Mark 10. This gentleman shows up and calls him good master, or in other translations, good teacher. And that's what triggers Jesus into answering, why do you call me good? There's one good, and that is God. So here Jesus is calling himself not the good master, but he's calling himself the good shepherd. The good shepherd. So Jesus is in fact calling himself good, and he does that 3 times in this chapter. Let's go down, let's keep reading. Let's start again at verse 11, John 10, verse 11, and keep going down. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. But he that is a hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and flee. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is a hireling, and careth not for the sheep. Verse 14. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. Again, Jesus calls himself the good shepherd one more time. So let's go through it. Verse 11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. Well, that's two. 2 times that he calls himself the good shepherd. Verse 14, I am the good shepherd and know my sheep. What did he do? He just called himself good 3 times. 3 times. There is none good but one. That is God. And that one is Jesus Christ, who is the good shepherd. If that's the criteria that the Unitarians, the Muslims, the Jehovah's Witnesses want to go by, well then that's it. That's it. Stop denying it. Jesus himself called himself God, if that's what you want to go by to try to argue that Jesus denied being God. I hope you, all of you watching, enjoyed this video. I appreciate the time, and keep those verses in mind especially when you encounter Jehovah's Witnesses and Muslims. There's very few Unitarians around, but there are plenty of Jehovah's Witnesses and Muslims around, and the ones that have read their stuff, they're going to know Mark 10 very much, because they love that verse to try to say that Jesus denied being God. If the words of Jesus mean anything, then to them it will mean that Jesus is God, because he called himself good. And Jesus says there is none good but one, and that is God. Jesus is God. He is the good shepherd. Thank you for watching.